Oi, gente, tudo bom? Prazer, eu sou a Mari, sou uma das fundadoras da Sputnik, que está ajudando a ColaborAmerica aí há uns 3 anos já, com toda essa parte de experiência. E para mim é um prazer estar aqui, porque para mim o Sistema B é uma das empresas mais revolucionárias que a gente tem hoje da nova economia, pelo simples fato de ela ser um tradutor e um agente de ajuda para que as empresas consigam fazer isso, né? A gente sabe que toda essa questão de impacto, de sustentabilidade, que a nova economia exige, ela é muito complexa de ser de fato feita dentro das organizações, exige muito trabalho. E a minha empresa está no processo de certificação B, e para mim a principal forma de ajuda é que eles nos ajudam como um consultor mesmo, né? Todo aquele, como é que chama, aquele formulário do site, ele acaba nos auxiliando a pensar coisas que a gente jamais pensaria se a gente não tivesse acesso àquilo. Então, estou muito feliz de estar aqui com ele, porque, de fato, ele é uma pessoa que tem um projeto assim, incrível. E é isso, muito obrigada. A gente vai continuar agora com a Katherine. A Katherine é escocesa. Hey, Katherine, thanks for coming. Eu vou apresentar ela em português. Para quem precisar de tradutor, a gente tem o tradutor ali na frente, a palestra vai ser em inglês. E a Katherine, eu acho que vem trazer um conteúdo muito relevante e de acordo com o que a gente vem vendo nesses últimos 2 talks, que é como a gente pode fazer essa nova economia e como a gente pode trazer as pessoas e o planeta como protagonistas dessa nova economia. Então, a Katherine vem trazer um pouco da visão dela. Ela é pesquisadora da Wellbeing Economy Alliance, né, da Escócia, e ela vem, enfim, ela é PhD em Escócia, ela é uma grande pesquisadora e está, inclusive, fazendo um livro que vai ser lançado agora em 2019, que é The Economies of Arrival. Ok? Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, and I'm so sorry about my lack of Portuguese, my lack of Spanish. All I can offer you is my Australian-Scottish combination, and for anyone in doing the translation, I don't know if you can flash at me or something so I can slow down. I'm really excited to be here. I think this is one of the most exciting gatherings of the year, because it's so many different people coming together to turn their energy and their attention to how we can make the economy a better place. And that's what I want to talk about. How do we realign our economic systems with what people and planet really need so that we get it right and that we can deliver for the 21st century? Right, keep it there. So it seems that every week we're getting more and more signs of climate breakdown, of environmental catastrophe. We've got the IPCC telling us that we've got just 12 years to make the changes that we need to keep the planet below 1.3 degrees, 1.5 degrees, if we're lucky. We've got WWF just a few weeks ago warning of huge species loss. We've got all scientists telling us that unless we change our ways, we're going to be entering a stage of the 6th mass extinction. But of course, it's not just plastic. Oh, crikey. This is going fast, isn't it? Is this turning automatically? Right, I'm going to go backwards. Hold it on this one. Can you go back 1 slide? Right. Okay, underneath those words, there's a little sign that's saying, what bottle is that? And this is sort of, if we don't change our ways, this is how our children in the future will be going out exploring nature because essentially we've got scientists telling us now that human beings are putting so much pressure on the planet. They are now the dominant force changing Earth systems. And so they're calling it the Anthropocene. But a lot of people are looking around and saying, hang on, wait a minute, because it's not just all human beings. There is a certain sort of person defined by their huge consumption and their bank balances who are putting much more pressure on the planet. And people are now saying, well, maybe we shouldn't use the word Anthropocene. Maybe we should be a little bit more nuanced and talk about the Plutocene, where it's the plutocrats who are the ones who are putting most pressure on the planet. And you can see this in all sorts of research. Just some research I was involved in a couple of years ago, we calculated that of the top richest 10% of the world's population, no matter where they lived, they accounted for almost 50% of the world's CO2 emissions. And so we've just got to remember that it's not everyone who is putting most pressure on the planet. It's the very richest people, and it's those always the poorest who are hardest and first hit. And inequality of pressure on the planet is, of course, mirrored by inequality of access to economic resources. We've had the World Inequality Report telling us that in almost every region of the world, economic inequality has increased in the last few decades. We're at a state now where the top 1% has as much wealth as the rest of the 99% of the world's population. And Professor Guy Standing has described the world's labour markets now in this pyramid. And he talks about at that top level, we've got the elite. These are people whose money makes more money for them. These are the rentiers who just sit back and their wealth generates more wealth for them. These are people who've got very significant political impact. Below them is the salariat. These are people who've got pretty secure jobs, nice pensions, they work pretty hard, but they're in a pretty nice situation. Below that, go back. Below that is what Standing calls the professions. And these are people who have less job security, but pretty high wages as well, because they've got high levels of skills. So they zoom around the world with their Apple laptops, and they earn a lot of money because of their high skills in design or website design, that sort of thing. And then below them, I promise I'm not touching this. There's a little ghost in here. Can you go back to the pyramid slide? Oh, okay, thank you. Below that is the old working class, and these are the people that in the industrialized world, the welfare states of the post-Second World War era were designed for. These are the people who the unions worked for. These are the people who are now being made desperately insecure by changes in the labour market. And below that is a term that made Guy Standing famous, the precariat. These are people who are treated as just-in-time inventory, on demand at the click of an app or an employer's phone call. These are people who are on zero-hour contract, the gig economy people. And then below that are this huge mass of people in informal work or unemployed people. And estimates is that there is about 40% of the world's population are in surplus to the requirements of the world's capitalist system, other than it putting downward pressure on wages. So it's a pretty scary situation. And we know that these sorts of levels of economic inequality, you can go to the next slide now, that we know that these levels of economic inequality have huge impacts, whether it's on people's sense of well-being, it's on their political engagement, and here in life expectancy. Now, this is where I live in Glasgow. This is the tube system, the train system. Now, Glasgow is a small town. It's less than 500,000. But if you get on the train system on the west end of the city, for every train stop that you travel east, men living in that area lose 2 years of life expectancy, to the point that a gap between west end of the city and the east end of the city, which is not far at all, we're talking a couple of miles, you're talking about 14-year gap in life expectancy for men, and it gets lower and lower. So these issues are really a matter of life and death. And, okay, next slide. And yet, we've got world's politicians telling us that GDP is going up, that stock markets are flourishing, that consumer confidence is increasing. And yet the problem is, so many of those statistics that we see flashed up on our TV screens in the morning business news or on our mainstream newspapers talking about how the economy is doing, so many of those statistics bear very little resemblance to what life is really like for everyday people. And so, if you can't see this because the lighting's a bit funny, a little character says, yes, the economy has never been healthier, and the response is, and the drugs needed to cope with it have never been more affordable. And so what people are doing, they're realizing that they're living in an economy that is not serving their needs, that's making them feel precarious, that's taking the rug out from under their feet, that's not delivering enough economic security for them or for their family. It's not giving them steady future prospects. And so they're reaching for simple coping mechanisms. And whether it's turning themselves inward, if there's a little clicker on the slides that's making it click automatically, if you can turn it off, that would be good. But also while they're turning themselves inward in terms of drug and alcohol abuse, they're also turning on each other. And they're hiding away behind walls and fences, and they're retreating into gated communities if they can afford to, or into their Twitter bubbles. And we see this, and I don't need to tell you guys this, we see this in our politics more and more every day around the world, and yet more and more examples of people searching for putting up barriers against each other and hiding away from each other, entrenching themselves rather than reaching out to each other. And you add those trends together, the trends of environmental breakdown, climate breakdown, environmental catastrophe, with the fact our economy is only serving people at the very top. And you add them together, and we start to see that in macro terms, while GDP is largely increasing, this is the blue line, measures that take into account social progress have been flatlining since the late 70s. So this is a genuine progress indicator, which essentially takes GDP and it takes out some bad stuff and adds in good things. So it takes out inequality or commuting, for example, but adds in access to green space or volunteering. And you see this widening gap between GDP and genuine progress. Another way of looking at that, this is a new entrant onto the field of beyond GDP measures, the social progress indicator. And they've tallied up, and you can see in the y-axis, over 50 different types of social progress measures. And you can have a look on their website because there's a brilliant amount of data there. But that's the y-axis up the side, social progress. Along the x-axis is GDP per capita. And they've mapped various countries. And you see that at early stages of economic development, more and more growth really matters. You get very quick returns in terms of social progress. But at fairly low levels of GDP per capita, about 20,000, you start to get what economists would talk about of diminishing marginal returns. You essentially get less bang for your buck in terms of economic growth, in delivering in terms of social progress. So maybe at that point, we've got to have a different conversation about what sort of economy we need. And the scary situation is when you scrutinize the economy in terms of how well it does in meeting the social needs of everyone, lifting people above a social foundation, but at the same time, not pushing the planet beyond its capability, not breaching an environmental ceiling. We've got a pretty bad news story. And these are ecological economists from the University of Leeds, and what they've done is they've mapped for countries how well they do in terms of keeping below an environmental ceiling, but at the same time lifting their citizens above a social foundation. If any of you know Kate Raworth's work around the donut, this stuff will be familiar to you. And the bad news is no country comes close to delivering on both fronts. If they did, we'd see... Thank you. If they did, you'd see more countries in the top left-hand corner here. The only country that comes close is Vietnam. And so in the face of that, next slide. In the face of that, this is a solution that we're offered. We're told that happiness is as simple as opening a bottle of Coke or going shopping. Can you do the next slide, please? And there's this whole industry building up around the idea of the individualization of happiness. This is my local newsagent, and I was staggered to walk in there a couple of weeks ago and see on the magazine shelves, next to the home interior magazines, there's now a proliferation of magazines selling to people essentially apparent solutions on how to get your happiness. And so I opened up one of them and thought, what are these guys talking about? Are they going to talk about changing inequality and delivering good lives to people and creating more benefit corporations? No. What their solutions are things like take your dog for a walk, invite your friends around for a drink, and do some mindfulness, which, of course, is all really, really nice. If you're not working 3 jobs just to keep your family above the breadline, then you have time to take your dog for a walk. It's all really nice if you've got enough money and time that you can invite your friends around for a nice drink on a Wednesday afternoon. And it's okay to do some mindfulness, of course, to cope, or whatever form of relaxation you need. But if that's all we're doing, then we won't be turning our attention to the circumstances that make people feel distressed. All right, next slide, please. And so essentially what is on offer from mainstream politics and from industry conversations is telling people to change your thinking, become more positive, basically change how you approach your situation rather than look at the circumstances that are keeping people depressed, keeping them damaged, keeping them stressed, keeping them alienated. And if any of you have seen Martin Luther King's maladjustment speech, you would know just how toxic this agenda is, because maybe we shouldn't be adjusted to a toxic society. So what we want to do is change those circumstances, change the economic system that is doing so much harm to people. Now, this is a picture of my little nephew. He's a cheeky little one. And if any of you have got a 7-year-old in your life as a nephew or as a grandchild or as a daughter, they've probably reached that stage where they're constantly saying to you, but why? But why, Mum? But why, Auntie Catherine? But why, Dad? And we need to be much more like those young 7-year-olds. We need to not accept that it's just a matter of changing our psychology and telling ourselves to be more happy and take our dog for a walk and invite friends around for a drink, and then we will be fine. We need to ask, what are the causes of so much stress and harm and alienation and precariousness in our economy? And then that takes us to a conversation about the economic system. Now, this was John Maynard Keynes writing almost 90 years ago, and he tells us that the economic system prevalent at the time, which is not a million miles away from where we are now, particularly not in terms of economic inequality, this current economic system is not a success. It's not intelligent, it's not beautiful, it's certainly not just when we think about the huge levels of economic inequality. It doesn't deliver the goods. We dislike it and we're beginning to despise it. And I think we see that every day when we look at how people are reacting to this nature of this economic system. But he was asking almost 90 years ago, we don't know what to put in its place. Well, in fact, we do. And there are lots of different names for this, whether it's a donut economy or a regenerative economy or a circular economy or a finer future. We're calling it a well-being economy, essentially an economy that is geared up to deliver human and ecological well-being. And to get at the core of it, you can pore through the scholarship of great development thinkers like my favorite Manfred Max Neef or Amartya Sen or Martin Nussbaum, or you can talk to neuroscientists who spend their days scanning individuals' brains, and when they understand when do people feel stressed, when do they feel happy, when do they feel content, when do they not have the stress hormones, cortisol, pulsing around in their system. Or, even more importantly, you can hear it when you sit down with communities, wherever you are in the world, whether it's in the slums of Delhi or up in the Amazon or in some of the poorest parts of Glasgow. Whenever you sit down with communities and ask them what matters to them, you get the same sort of answers. You get people saying what is really important to life is relationships, it's sense of security, it's about having sense of purpose, it's about having enough money, sufficiency of income, but not having a crazy amount, but having enough money, and it's about being in the natural world. You pull that all together and you get the essence of a well-being economy, an economy that puts collective well-being for all of us and of people and planet first, that focuses on our fundamental human needs, not some short-term pseudo-satisfiers that Max Neef would warn us about, not buying those happiness magazines, but really focusing on fundamental human needs where resources, ecological and economic resources, are shared fairly, and including in terms of how we tackle gender inequality, and recognizing that the economy is embedded in society rather than the other way around, not at the beck and call of society. And if you want to visualize it, you can put it inside this idea of this donut, this space, the green space that sits below below an environmental ceiling, but where everyone is lifted above a social foundation. And it's because in that space, it's safe in an environmental sense and it's just in a human sense. So if we're going to repair our economy through donut repair, if we're going to really fix our economy, then we need to get our head around so many different sorts of changes. For almost every color of these cakes you can imagine, every color of sprinkle on top of them are the sort of changes we're going to need. It's going to be in our business systems, how we do policy making, how we design infrastructure, how we teach economics, how we do community projects. So many different changes to get there. And it starts with recognizing that, thank you, that, and this is from the UN, so this is not a wild and crazy NGO that like sort of ones I work for. This is the UN saying that the economy is embedded in society, and both of them are embedded in our natural world. And that's a fundamental repositioning to the current way that the economy is on top of society and extracts from society, and on top of nature and extracts from nature. It's also massively about realigning how we measure progress with what really matters to us as humans and as the natural world. So getting better measures of progress, whether it's the social progress index or the genuine progress index or whatever it is, in a way it doesn't matter, as long as the index itself is better measured. And whether it's for the economies writ large or for businesses, as we've just heard with Benefit Corps. It's doing things like what Wales are doing, and they've got this wonderful initiative where they've appointed a Future Generations Commissioner. And this is an example of the sort of long-term joined-up thinking that we need to get inside that donut, to create a wellbeing economy. And they've got this Future Generations Commissioner who will scrutinise every piece of legislation that comes from the Welsh Government in terms of how it impacts the wellbeing of current and future generations. It's also about saying that we can do more than just getting to this second middle panel of redistribution and fixing after and cleaning up after all the problems that the current economic model has created. It's essentially saying we can do more than that, than just ameliorating and healing after the damage is done. What we can do is get into the third panel, where we can talk about an economic system that delivers social justice first time around. Next slide. And that is about an economy that pre-distributes, that is so full of economic democracy that we have much more equal outcomes at the first place, and we don't need to then turn our attention to government and say, please help us fix these drastically unequal outcomes through redistribution. So it's, again, a fundamental redesigning of the economy. It's about changing how we take care of nature, but it's also about shifting how we think about what we own, what our possessions are, and perhaps even throwing out neoliberal ideas of obsession with individual ownership and actually turning our attention to what is it we really need. Do we need the thing itself, or do we need the service it provides? It's about for-purpose businesses, as we've just been hearing about with benefit corporations, or it's about also democratizing how we create the firms. And this rather ugly building here is Mondragon, one of the world's most famous worker cooperatives. But also it's about much smaller initiatives where we see the community. This is a tiny little village in the south of Scotland called Dunbar, where the community said, we want a bakery, so we're going to own it collectively as a community. But again, it's a massive shaking up of how we design businesses, so they're not just designed in a way to take economic resources and extract them upwards to remote shareholders, but actually keep them circulating in the local area. It's of course about renewable energy, and it's massively about climate justice. It's about those of us in the global north recognizing that unless we urgently change our economic models, there will be literally no ecological room left for everyone around the world to increase their living standards. So it's massively about understanding the change in the economic model and ensuring that we share technology and finances to make other people cut to the chase and create a well-being economy from the beginning. And in terms of individuals, it's about realigning how we act, how we behave, how we engage with each other, with what makes us innately human. It's about reconnecting ourselves with our innate need, our natural instinct for collaboration, for cooperation, and for caring for each other. Because, and I love this little cartoon, that's where real freedom comes from. And so there's lots of exciting things emerging. This is what's really heartening. Amidst all the dire trends that are coming at us and amidst all the really scary news that we see, what's really heartening is that we see people who every day are rolling up their sleeves to create this sort of economy in their communities, in their businesses, as we've just heard, or in the corridors of power. And what's really important about these projects, even if they're small, even if they're in microcosm, is that they start to tell us and they start to show us what a different economy can look like. They demonstrate feasibility and they demonstrate desirability of what a well-being economy can be. And so they've got this huge important significance, not just for the impact they make in and of themselves, but they've got an impact because they are the pioneers of this different economic system. And so we see examples, whether it's women in Ethiopia who are coming together as producers to form producer cooperatives, to take some collective power in the marketplace and not just be at the beck and call of a market that was designed elsewhere, but actually saying, no, we want to work together to collectively have, and together is through solidarity, join up and create the market that we need to serve us. It's places like Triodos Bank using the banking system and flows of investment to deliver what really matters for people. I'm going to race through then. Just a couple more slides. I've just got my 1 minute. And to the next one. Okay. So I work for a tiny but mighty new organization called the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. And essentially, this is our theory of change. Our sense is that if we work together, we can do quite extraordinary things. And so what we want to do is connect all the amazing work that's already being done, work together to amplify the profiles and share the stories of what's happening so others can be inspired by it and replicate on it and emulate it and work together to increase impact, whether that's individually where people are operating or increase impact by working together to change the policy regime so that we have a policy regime that's much more aligned with the sort of work that we need to create a wellbeing economy. Because at the moment, all those people who are doing such amazing work, they're still going against the grain. They're facing massive headwinds. So what we want to do is connect everyone together to make it happen. Next one. And essentially, that is about taking all this amazing work from the margins to the mainstream, and it can happen. This is what is really optimistic. We've seen it happen around the world. Things do change when you hit a critical mass, when you work together and team up, when you frame the story in a different way, when you point out the problems of the current state of affairs, things do change. And this is a little plea from me. One of the things we're really trying to work on is how do we take this conversation from conferences like this out to everyday folk who wouldn't spend their Friday coming along for this conversation, to people who drive our taxis or make our coffees or cut our hair. Because how we explain these things really matters. And you can see here this lovely example. When we frame things in the right way, it makes a difference. So if anyone is an expert in storytelling or advertising or marketing, please come and chat to me. Would love your help. But essentially, We All is about connecting, whether it's businesses, academics, cities, civil society groups. We're working with pioneering governments who are saying that in the 21st century, development is not just about how big is your GDP, but it's about delivering human and ecological well-being. And we've got amazing growing membership, including Sistema B, and we're really proud to have Sistema B as one of our most exciting and engaged members. But essentially, you're all welcome. Our thinking is on membership. If you are someone who recognises that the economy needs to be changed to become more humane and more sustainable, and if you want to work with others to create that, then you're welcome in the wellbeing economy. So please jump on our website, be part of this growing movement, because together we might just be able to shift this economy. Thank you ever so much.
Gente, alguém quer se aventurar a fazer uma pergunta para a Katherine? Alguém? Ninguém?
Is there enough time?
It's a good question. So the question was, is there enough time? Well, the IPCC have said there's 12 years. I think there is enough time because there is so much stuff happening. We don't see it at the macro level because we've still got an economic system that is massively counter to the sort of economy we need for the 21st century. But there is change, whether at the city level, amazing businesses, all the sort of organisations that are joining We All. But I don't know. I don't know what life's going to be like for that little nephew of mine. It's certainly going to be extraordinarily different. I'm heartened by some of the technology that's now turning its attention, but those people who think technology will save us, I think are deluded, because the extent of technological change that we need is so much more rapid than we've ever had yet. I guess what motivates me, and probably what motivates everyone in this room and at this conference, is that if we don't move quickly, there certainly won't be enough time.
Thank you so much, Katherine.